Hi guys, in this video I will be talking about problem 3-1 in your homework. In your homework for chapter 3, these problems can be found at the end of the chapter on page 53 in your book. So problem 3-1 is talking about SEUs, surplus economic units, and DEUs, deficit economic units. And if you go back to your book, and like I showed you before, and we just do a find and just go SEU and do a find, we'll find the place in the book pretty quick where that is, where they talk about this, right here on page, scroll 38. So I've taken part of this out and put it right here so we can see this. This is a very good graphic in helping us to understand how surplus economic units work in tandem with financial institutions to allow deficit economic units to get the funds they need to operate. So typically, and the advantages to this is simply SEUs have different needs than DEUs, and the need of an SEU would just be typically a household that wants to have a place where they can save some money, maybe earn very low interest, but always have access to their funds if they need it. So they'll want to save, relatively small amounts of money and always be able to have access to it if they need it. Let me just grab this guy right here. So these are SEUs, and they're, the typical SEU is just a household that wants to save some money, and they'll put that money into a bank, and then the bank will pool all these small savings accounts, and one thing they can do, for example, is buy bonds that are being issued by these larger companies. And when they buy these bonds, they use the funds from the savings to buy them. And this is a long-term investment for the bank buying these bonds, because the bonds will have a return yield. We talked about those a little bit in chapter 2. And the DEU will use the money from the bonds, the financing from the bonds, to operate their business. Now, the other way they could get, the other way that this could work for the DEUs is that they could actually get their financing through equity. Equity simply means that they sell shares in their company, and that's how they could get their money that they need to operate. And we'll talk a lot more about that as we get into the course. But I just wanted to point out that the two ways that companies can finance their operations is through debt instruments like bonds, and through equity financing, actually selling shares of their stock, shares of their company. Okay, so what are the questions? So the question is, we've pretty much answered these. It's talking about, or not talking about, but it's asking how a society would have to operate if there were no middle person here, if there were no financial institutions that could allow the money from the smaller surplus economic units to be used by the larger deficit economic units. And the answer is, it just wouldn't work. It just wouldn't work. The book answer, if you want to see it, is, I just have it right down here, is if there were no financial institutions, the SEUs and the DEUs would find the amount of money needed by a given DU did not match the amount of money available by a given SEU. The DUs would need more. One larger firm would need a lot more than one household could lend. So it just wouldn't work. Now the second part of this is how do financial institutions help overcome the problem here? The problem that these funds, the amounts of the funds needed and the funds available just don't match up. So when we've already pretty much talked about this, the financial institution or bank would pool all of the 100 separate deposits from the surplus, smaller, typically households, surplus economic units, and they would pass that money along in larger increments to the deficit economic units. And this could be done either through a debt or equity claim. And a debt would be typically in bonds, and the equity would be typically in stocks. And once again, don't worry about that right now because we're going to talk about that in detail a whole lot more as we get further into the course. So that should help you with problem or question 1, I guess. And once again, make sure that you understand the concept here. And when you find the part in the book or the place in the book that where this is, just read everything, read all through this. Make sure you really have a firm understanding of what financial intermediation is. Okay?